I am the Hermit, and welcome to my shed. In this video I'm going to discuss the Jasper fire and how it could have been prevented, as well as one of the main culprits, mountain pine beetle, where it came from and how it infested Jasper National Park. As someone who was born in BC, I spent my life in forestry, from fighting fires during summer break in high school to working for consultants. I believe my knowledge in forestry can give a different perspective of the fire than you may get somewhere else. So let's open up the door and see what's inside. Jasper National Park, located in the Canadian Rockies, is one of Canada's most iconic natural treasures. It is recognized as a World Heritage Site, boasting diverse ecosystems that include dense forests, alpine meadows, rivers, and an abundance of wildlife. These landscapes are crucial for biodiversity, recreation, and tourism, drawing millions of views each year. However, the park's ecosystems are fragile, especially in the face of the climate changing, invasive species, and human interference. For years, scientists had warned that Jasper was increasingly vulnerable to devastating wildfires due to the proliferation of dead trees caused by the mountain pine beetle. These warnings, though, were not given the attention they deserve. In the 1990s, the mountain pine beetle began spreading across British Columbia, attacking and killing millions of pine trees. The beetles burrow into the bark of mature lodgepole pines, disrupting the tree's ability to transport nutrients. This leads to widespread tree death, transforming large sections of forest into deadwood, prime fuel for wildfires. I started chasing down these beetles while working in the Chilcotin through the 90s, the Peace River region in the early thousands, and the southern interior in the 2010s. Mountain pine beetle infestation originated in Tweedsmuir National Park in the late 80s due to poor forest management and the changing of the climate. The beetles, which thrive in warm conditions, have benefited from BC's increasingly mild winters. Historically cold winter temperatures acted as a natural control mechanism for beetle populations, as sustained cold snaps of -40 or lower would kill off large numbers of beetles. However, rising temperatures have diminished the frequency and intensity of these cold periods, allowing more beetles to survive the winter. Warmer temperatures also extend the summer season, allowing beetles to reproduce more efficiently and spread faster. Decades of forest management practices in BC, particularly fire suppression, have also played a critical role in the beetles' uncontrolled spread. For years, forest fires were actively suppressed to protect timber resources and human settlements. While well-intentioned, these fire suppression efforts rendered the natural thinning of forests, allowing vast, dense stands of pine trees to grow uninterrupted. In a healthy forest ecosystem, fires serve to clear out older trees and create a more diverse age structure in the forest, which helps reduce the risk of large-scale beetle infestations. The absence of natural forest fires, combined with monoculture reforestation practices, has led to an overabundance of mature lodgepole pine trees, the beetles' preferred host. These older trees have thicker bark, providing ideal conditions for beetles to lay their eggs and for larvae to survive. The vast availability of mature trees created a perfect environment for the beetles to thrive and spread rapidly. The mountain pine beetle is a native species in BC, and periodic outbreaks have occurred for centuries. However, in the past, these outbreaks were kept in check by natural controls, including cold weather, predators like woodpeckers, and the natural defense mechanisms of the pine trees themselves. When the beetle population reaches a critical mass, its growth becomes exponential. Each female beetle lays up to 75 eggs, and the larva bore into the tree, killing it by introducing a blue-stained fungus that prevents the tree from transporting water or nutrients. As the beetle population grew, it overwhelmed the forests of BC. The sheer number of beetles killed millions of trees, and with an abundance of food and favorable climate conditions, the infestation spread rapidly. The beetles even crossed the Rocky Mountains into Alberta, threatening new regions. By the early 2000s, Jasper's forests were filled with dead or dying trees, their needles turning red and eventually falling off, leaving behind dry, brittle timber that could easily ignite. Scientists and forest managers repeatedly warned the government about the increasing risk of fire due to this fuel load. Without intervention, they said, a fire could spark and rapidly spread, consuming the dead trees and any living vegetation in its path. However, despite these warnings, little action was taken to mitigate the risk. Few dead trees were cleared, controlled burns were limited, and public awareness campaigns about fire safety were minimal. Forest management is a delicate balance between conservation and intervention. In areas prone to wildfires, one of the most effective methods of prevention is through prescribed burns. These controlled fires mimic natural processes by clearing away dead vegetation, thereby reducing the amount of flammable material in the forest. So let's move on and figure out how the beetles got into Jasper. Research has shown that prevailing wind patterns played a key role in transporting beetles across the Rocky Mountains, which form a natural barrier between BC and Alberta. Normally this mountain range would prevent the beetles from migrating eastward, but during the height of the infestation, winds facilitated the beetles crossing. In particular, high-altitude wind currents carry beetles over the mountain passes, depositing them on the eastern slopes, where they could then infest Alberta forests. These wind-borne beetles were responsible for initiating the infestation in areas of Alberta that had never before experienced such an outbreak. The continuity of the lodgepole pine forest across the BC-Alberta border also played a critical role in the beetle spread. Lodgepole pine is the primary host for mountain pine beetles, and Alberta's forests, particularly the foothills of the Rocky Mountains, contain extensive stands of mature lodgepole pine. These forests provided an ideal environment for the beetle to establish themselves and continue spreading once they crossed into Alberta. Although research has implied that the beetles flew over the Rockies with the help of the wind, like I mentioned earlier, I'm a little skeptical. Based on my experience working in the Peace River District at the time, my belief is that they migrated into Alberta by transporting beetle-infested logs from BC via Dawson Creek. As the logs are being transported, the mature beetles fly from the log decks onto the pine trees along the highway, dispersing randomly as they go. I believe the experts don't want to say this was the main reason because the implications against the forestry corporations involved would be massive. In the case of Jasper, experts recommended aggressive action, including prescribed burns and selective logging, to remove the beetle-killed trees. Forest management practices in countries like Sweden and Finland show the effectiveness of this approach. These countries face similar fire risks, but through careful management they have successfully avoided the large-scale fires seen in North America. Despite these recommendations, the government's forest management policies leaned heavily towards conservation over intervention. Public opinion played a significant role. Many environmental groups, backed by public sentiment, opposed large-scale tree removal, arguing that it would damage the park's natural beauty. The government, wary of backlash, chose to delay significant intervention. By 2017, it was clear that Jasper was sitting on a powder keg. Conservative MP Jim Eglinski raised alarms in the House of Commons, urging the federal government to take action against the growing fire risk. He emphasized the need to clear the dead trees and conduct more prescribed burns to prevent the park from becoming a tinderbox.
Mr. Speaker, Jasper National Park, one of Canada's major tourist destinations, has been devastated by the pine beetle infestation. Much of the forest is dead or dying. The dead trees are a tremendous fuel load and present a significant risk to the community of Jasper. Residents are concerned for their own safety and that of the visitors and the security of their homes. With a high risk of wildfires fueled by a forest devastated by the pine beetle, have the Liberals put a plan in place to protect this park?
The Honourable Minister of the Environment and Climate Change.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Our government is absolutely committed to the ecological integrity of our national parks. That is my first priority as a minister. We are working very hard in all of our parks, including Jasper National Park. I look forward to talking to the member further about this and seeing how we can move forward. Thank you.
Unfortunately, bureaucratic inertia and lack of political will meant that these warnings fell on deaf ears. The government's focus was on climate change, with officials downplaying the immediate threat posed by the dead trees. In 2022, a report from Parks Canada highlighted the severity of the situation. It noted that only a fraction of the necessary preventive measures had been implemented. Of the 500 million seedlings needed to replace the dead trees, only 18,000 had been planted. Additionally, only 1.6 hectares of pine beetle-killed trees had been mechanically cleared, despite almost 50% of the park being affected. This failure to act allowed the fuel load to continue growing, and by the summer of 2024, Jasper was primed for disaster. In July 2024, a combination of dry weather and high winds created the perfect conditions for a wildfire, A lightning strike or human carelessness sparked the fire that would rage for weeks, consuming vast areas of forest. The fire spread quickly, feeding on the dead trees and dry underbrush. Firefighters from across Alberta were called in to battle the blaze, but the sheer scale of the fire made it nearly impossible to control. As the fire encroached on the town and tourist area, thousands were evacuated. Local wildlife, including endangered species, fled from the flames, many of them succumbing to the inferno. The fire devastated large swaths of Jasper National Park. Over 30% of the park's forested area was destroyed, leaving behind a charred landscape. Wildlife habitats were obliterated, and the park's delicate ecosystems were thrown into disarray. The economic impact on the local community was equally severe. Tourism, a vital source of income for the region, plummeted as visitors stayed away due to the fire. Local businesses, already reeling from the effects of the COVID-19 pandemic, faced further hardship. For many of the park's residents and stakeholders, the fire represented more than just a natural disaster. It was a personal tragedy. The park had been their home, their livelihood, and their passion. The knowledge that this disaster could have been prevented only deepened the sense of loss and frustration. In the aftermath of the fire, the question on everyone's mind was, could this have been prevented? The overwhelming consensus from experts was yes. If the government had acted on the numerous warnings from scientists and forest managers, the fire could have been contained or mitigated. Had there been more aggressive logging of dead trees, more prescribed burns, and better public education campaigns about fire safety, the fuel load in Jasper would have been significantly reduced. This, in turn, would have made it much harder for the fire to spread as quickly and destructively as it did. The Jasper fire serves as a stark reminder of the consequences of inaction. Moving forward, it is essential for governments to take fire prevention seriously and to listen to the advice of scientists and experts. The failure to do so in Jasper should not be repeated elsewhere. Policies must be put in place to ensure the forest management is proactive, not reactive. This means conducting regular prescribed burns, clearing dead trees, and replanting forests with resilient species. It also means investing in fire detection and suppression technologies to catch fires early before they spiral out of control. Public opinion plays a significant role in shaping government policy. In the case of Jasper, the government's reluctance to act was partially driven by a desire to avoid public backlash. Moving forward, it is crucial to engage the public in fire prevention efforts. This means educating people about the importance of prescribed burns and the dangers of leaving dead trees in the forest. The 2024 Jasper fire was a disaster, but it was not inevitable. It was the result of years of government negligence, policy failures, and a refusal to act on scientific advice. This fire could have been prevented, or at the very least its scale and destruction could have been mitigated. As Canada grapples with the increasing threat of wildfires due to the changing climate and forest mismanagement, the lessons learned from Jasper must serve as a guide for the future. The cost of inaction is too high, both for the environment and for the people who call these forests home. Well, that's about it. If you made it this far, thanks for hanging out with me. Make sure to like and subscribe if you want to see this hermit move out of his shed. Anyways, I hope you enjoyed the video, and until next time, stay safe out there.